Today we are covering Andor, Season 1, Episode 8, Narkina 5. Something I didn't catch last time that I wanted to mention, that I was thinking about last night as I was continuing to process, is there's a moment when everyone's running along the beach, running from the shore troopers, and Cassian cannot help but be observant. He's watching with interest and curiosity. Of course he is. It's sort of his style, his approach. In fact, one of his greatest traits is that he is tremendously observant. But the consequence of that is that he is observing, which is exactly why they went after him. Did you notice the common theme? Of course you did, but forgive me for pointing out the obvious. All the other beachgoers were keeping their heads down, literally in this case. All of them were doing everything in their power to not draw attention to themselves. Do you remember the bouncer all the way back, the very first episode? Do you remember the chief in, I believe, the second episode? Do you remember the yard workers? Do you remember several of the Imperial troopers? Keep your heads down. Don't make any trouble. The desperation that Cassian is feeling is very palpable. He keeps trying to insist that he's just a tourist, and the absurdity of it is so palpable. He really, really did do nothing in this case. Now, there's nothing specific here, right? Like, it could be argued that he was a criminal, and that's an interesting argument to make. But for all intents and purposes, it's also wrong. If Rax wandered off, if Rax wandered off, stole $20, and then went about his business and was going to the candy store to buy something with that $20, and then I pull him over because he happened to be wearing a blue shirt and arrest him, and throw him into a work camp for that. I'm sorry, that is unacceptable. It doesn't matter if he stole the $20 from the store early. I know that sounds strange, but it's true. We cannot go after Hitler for wearing pink. We cannot go after our own citizenry for made-up reasons, because it should probably be worth noting that if Rax had done nothing wrong, he hadn't robbed that $20, they would have done the exact same thing to him for the exact same reason. This man was profiled in seconds, probably because they had a quota to meet. And, as has been hinted at for 2 episodes now, probably 5 if you're being technical about it, they have a greater need for an increased amount of labor. They need to get as many people arrested on as many trumped up charges as possible. Did you notice that the court scene, which I mentioned in the last episode, included no possibility of self-defense? No possibility of representation. No possibility of consideration by a jury or even a proper judge. There was no case. There was no courtroom. It skipped straight to sentencing. I know a lot of people seem to think this is true about real life, but it's actually not. At least not here in the United States. You don't get sentenced immediately. You get arrested immediately, which is the very first step in a very long series of steps that will eventually conclude in the actual culmination of the case. Forgive me for being angry about this, but this pisses me off how much people completely misunderstand such a basic level of everyday existence. So you get arrested. Well, that means you're guilty, right? No, that doesn't mean anything. You can get arrested for being drunk on the street. You could be arrested for, like, being someone who is in an area at a time. And under a proper system, with a proper jurisdiction and proper courts, and that varies from county to county, no, not state, not federal, it's county-based. Under a proper system, they'll just be like, all right, you're out, peace, sorry about this. Sometimes you don't get the sorry. Sometimes they're down on their quotas that week, or that month, or that quarter, and they decide to trump up some charges to go after. You ever wonder... You probably don't wonder why people who get arrested tend to get accused of like 30 crimes at once. It's because they're throwing the net as wide as they can so they can get you on just at least one of those things. Because that counts as a win for the prosecution department, and the prosecution department manages its budget based on how many wins they get every week or month or quarter. Yeah, you're free to go. That's all I got. 9 months of my life. Way more money than I'm going to tell you about. All I got was, you're free to go. Actually, I even remember the exact quote. You are now a free man. It was the exact quote. Immediate juxtaposition to Syril. Sorry, I didn't even finish my thought. I apologize. I just realized. There's this horrible, horrible feeling. I can't describe it to anybody who's never felt it before. It is a level of powerlessness so palpable that it feels like someone is crushing you internally. Like, I want you to try and imagine and feel like someone is squeezing your ribs inside of you. Because you start to realize, oh yeah, I was innocent, Mr. Debonair. So all charges dropped, go home, have fun. No nothing. You know, no recompense, no anything. My lawyer and I actually considered countersuing to try and cover costs, but we quickly determined that that just wasn't going to be worthwhile. And frankly, I just wanted the hell out of the system. Because the only thing we could countersue is actually the police department or the prosecution department, right? So, anyways, those tend to not work. So, I can't describe it. I'm stumbling at words. You cannot understand unless you've been there. I'm sorry to say that. You can't understand what it's like unless you've been in that moment where you know that it's wrong, where you know that you have done nothing wrong, where you know that you can't do anything about it and no one's listening and no one cares. Like, he's arguing with the guards who are loading the bus that he was just a tourist. Any possibility of him, of anybody listening to that statement has long since gone. Thank you, Ect, for the sub. As always, if you give me one moment, I will jot that down for whatever you put it towards. Which is the PMD block, Azerreich, and Undertale Yellow. Kingdom Hearts block, Chained Echoes, and FF7 R1. Thank you, Walker, for your support very much. Cut to Syril. Syril is still stirring up trouble. Of course he's still stirring up trouble. You know one thing I like about this episode? It makes something clear that I actually just said last time. Or 2 times ago. I forget exactly when I said it, but I talked about how when we answer, when we develop characters, villains specifically, it doesn't make them less villainous. It's a weird flaw that a lot of people fall into. I specifically called out the Bloody Baron over on Witcher 3, who is a villain. Let's be clear about that. This is not a good person. Adding character to him makes him a better character. You know, the fact that he's not, you know, sipping on the blood of angels while he's dousing his eyes with the tears of babies doesn't make him any less villainous. Yeah, Thanos from the MCU. Excellent character. Very villainous. Ganondorf. Several versions of Ganondorf, actually. Still a villain. Just because we sympathize and empathize and care, and just because there's layers and depth there, does not in any way change the fact that these are still evil people. Bloody men. So, Syril and Miro, I think, are starting to be developed, and have been developed quite a bit as characters. They are dedicated. They've got layers. They've got sympathy. It's so easy to understand and process where they're at, and where they're coming from. It does not make them in any way less villainous. Syril is literally trying to stir up trouble in his stupid, dinky, nowhere, nothing job because he's trying to fight an injustice. Of course, the officers actually come and notice. Cut over to Cassian, who's now on the bus. Oh, I know it's not literally a bus. Actually, fun fact, they don't really have buses all that often anymore. At least they didn't about, what was that, 10 years ago now? No, they put you in a van. A very, very crowded, cramped van. Yeah, I noticed Syril was wearing the gray suit. So, he gets in the bus, and they make them take off their shoes. That's entirely too relatable. That's something that they actually do, by the way. And then the magnetic thing that just adheres their hands. How many of you have ever been handcuffed before? I actually still get panic attacks just a little bit when I can't move my arms, when I'm restrained like that. It's a uniquely horrible sensation because like you just go to do a movement, you're not even thinking about it, just like to scratch your eye or whatever, and you don't really process that you actually physically can't because you're restrained. And then you try to do something else, and then you get restrained. You try to do something else, and you're restrained. You can't do anything. They don't actually show this very often in fiction. They don't handcuff you like this, actually. What they do is you've got a chain around your waist, like a belt. And that then adheres to the handcuffs, and also the the ankle cuffs. And all of that's all part of one chain. That's how restrained you are. You have to shuffle to move. So him just being held there and not even being able to do anything. Like literally imagine for a moment not being able, just do a favor with me right here. Put your arms on your hand rests and just keep him here for as long as you feel like doing to understand what this feels like to not be able to move these. I guarantee you within minutes this will drive you nuts. I wonder how long that flight was. Cut to Syril, foot tapping nervously. Miro shows up. Of course it's her. You've been here less than a month and filed 6 separate inquiry reports. His response, utterly unapologetically, Cassian Andor is a murderer and a threat to the Empire, and I've been trying to use what limited tools I have to find him. I hope Syril dies. I'm sorry. This man, however fleshed out and sympathetic and fantastically acted he is a monster. And that's important. This is something that is very important. He is a victim. They're all victims. All of them. Everyone in this galaxy is a victim, except for Palpatine himself, and even that's debatable. So, he's such a believer. His thing, his statement, I'm just trying to clear my name. My God. And what catches her attention is what was not in the report. And when she's frustrated about that, she says, what, you signed off? And he says, yeah, I wasn't actually allowed to read it. Yeah, that was entirely too real. And the great irony is she then decides, okay, that's enough worthy of my attention. Give him the report. Keep him here. Peace. This cuts to Cassian now landing at the prison facility, which is a bunch of giant buildings in the middle of a frickin' lake. That's horrifying. You ever swum long distance before? Like, we get a pretty good shot of that lake in its relative scale and scope. Imagine trying to swim from one of those things out to the shore. Just to... Oh yeah, I noticed there were 7 of them, of course. It would be impossible not to notice the motif. I'm not sure the significance, but there's definitely a very 7 fixation going on here. We then cut to an ISB meeting. Yularen is far less receptive to everything that's being talked about here and discussed. Indeed, he is far more your typical corrupt bureaucrat, which is funny, considering this is Yularen. But yeah, that tracks. He's just like, this is going to cost money, right? This is going to cost effort and time and work. You're going to drill down on Ferrex, find this thief, and then what? It is actually Radagaz who actually has to step in and try to defend her point. Cut to Luthen. First mistake he ever made, Ferrex. Yeah, Partagaz went to bat for Mira, which is... This is slightly more intensive music than I was anticipating. Oh, I see why. I'll let this finish. On program. So, the way they talk about going on program. Before I go further, I want to talk about something. Most of the people do this right here, right? And in case you don't see what I'm doing, lacing my fingers, putting them right above my head. Cassian doesn't do that. He does this. It's complying, but it's also making sure his hands are free to defend himself and ready to deal with whatever, which this man has literally been to prison. So that tracks. Then the troops show up. It's also barely complying. Gotta be defiant. And there's this really... I actually have to give special praise for actor number 57. Something I've said many times is that even your extras matter when it comes to acting and performance. A lot of people tend to think that it doesn't matter what Stormtrooper number 86 actually acts like. But no, a lot of characterization can come across through that, like we saw with the Shore Trooper in the previous episode. This guard, who I don't think they even actually name, and probably doesn't get much credit because this is his only thing, the actor does a really good job of selling the psycho who is trying very hard to hide it. Yeah, doesn't blink once, and essentially cannot help but give that little smile. Like, he's actually fighting it. Did you catch that? He's actually fighting not to smile. At least until he starts shocking them, and then it develops into an all-out grin. Your length of time is predetermined. The quality of your stay is up to you. And he could have just said things, right? Like, there's so many methods and metrics he could have used to go through this. But instead, he questions them in this way, like, the way he says it is so powerful. He doesn't say this word for word, but what he means is, you think you could take me? Huh? I'm here before you with no weapon. You think you got me? Well, let me go ahead and demonstrate why you don't. Oh yeah, by the way, this is minimally invasive punishment. Those of you who've been to prison before will be impressed by the... Let's cut to the chase. What he's saying is that the quality of the conditions here. Keep that in mind for a minute from now, because I'm going to bring that back up. And then he shocks them. Now, a few milliseconds would have been sufficient. Bzz, bzz. Just turn it on and turn it off immediately. That would have been entirely sufficient. Instead, he leaves it on for several seconds. You ever been electrocuted before? Because I have. It is the only time in my entire life that I have outright screamed. I have no memory of that event, actually. I am going off of witnesses who heard me scream. I have to give tremendous praise to both Diego Luna and the other people, the extras who are there, who do a really, really good job of physically getting across the idea of what it feels like to be electrocuted. I have no idea, Czar. Again, I have no memory of that moment. Either way, once again, these are just the same goddamn things as the bullies from the first episode. The rent-a-cops. Nothing's changed. We've moved a few steps up the rung, but the entire... The The view, the vista, hasn't changed 1 inch. Why would it? That's true all the way to the top. Then it cuts to a scene I have to praise. I have to. Yeah, now level 3 rent-a-cops. Because these are still not proper military on any level. These are thugs with a uniform. Cuts back to Syril. So, he's going through the report, and he can't believe how inaccurate the report is. Oh my god, it's so terrible. How, like... It's so terrible, right? How much they've screwed up the report. All she cares about, of course, is the information on Luthen, which is what she's actually after. So, okay. She asks for specific information about that. He has none. She's irritated at the waste of her time and says, all right, I'm out. We're cutting you loose. Don't bother me anymore. So she goes to leave, and she's already forgotten about Syril. But Syril, you can see it, can't you? Have you ever seen that film where, or that show, or that game, where the hero starts off, you know, in some kind of dead-end job, having been smeared for something they didn't really do. But then they get a last-minute chance, a balm. They reach out to one of the the hero groups, right? And they prove that they're worthy of attention, they're worthy of notice, they're worthy of focus, that they are the PC. And the person recognizes that and says, yes, yes, I will lift you up, I will recruit you, and you will join my organization, and together we will be... You see the format. Of course you do. This is exactly what happened to Cassian in this show. So, yeah, he cannot help but think that he is the main character here. That's why he immediately gives that little mini speech. I was a good deputy inspector. I was very good. I solved a double murder and found the killer in 2 days. First of all, no you weren't, no you weren't, no you didn't, and no you didn't. Let's actually look at the... Let's look at the chain of events there. What is the only reason he ever caught anything ever? Oh, that's right. Stalker guy, who I continue to call that because screw him. If Stalker guy had not decided to sell out Cassian, what would have happened is Mr. Inspector guy would have been yelling at his own people to find something, found absolutely nothing because there were no leads, and he is a terrible inspector who has no idea what he's doing and bumbles at his job constantly and has no leadership skills and has no coordination skills and has no pull or sway within the organization. And then his boss would have gotten back home after he had found absolutely nothing and would have tore him a new one and probably fired his ass for wasting time and resources on something that was always a dead-end thing, which was in direct violation of his actual orders, I might add. I agree that Stalker and I didn't actually deserve to die like that. Nobody does. I said that then and I mean it now. But I will never reward Stalker guy with actually calling him by his name because he doesn't deserve that either. Didn't even get offered. He wasn't even offered a reward. In fact, actually, sorry, let's flip that. I was thinking from the perspective of Stalker guy. He was such an incompetent inspector, he offered nothing. No carrot. No nothing. If he had offered something, there's at least a chance someone might have decided to sell him out. But no. Instead, he just said, I'm looking for this information. Please share. So, the best part about the speech he gives her is you can tell what he thinks is about to happen. You know, what happened? I was a good inspector. I did my job. You're right. Join me. But no, instead what she says is, nothing. I'm going to forget about this. Go home and go back to your stupid, pathetic, insignificant life. I've got more important things to deal with. And his response is, I could be a valuable asset going forward. He actually suggests she recruits him. He is just cut loose. With no reward, by the way. Of course. Just a lack of punishment. He is, of course, threatened as well. I really like Syril as a character. I cannot wait for him to die. Yeah, if you speak to this again, it will not be me you're speaking to. Yeah, Syril is just an extraordinarily well-presented fascist. He is. Because, and I'm going to say this as bluntly as I can, most intelligent people probably wouldn't be fascists, and those who are diseased in the mind. So you have a normal person who is fascist, and yes, I'm going to say this as bluntly and overtly as I can, it's because he's an incompetent idiot. No understanding, no perspective, no mentality. He is, in fact, a Krennic, and just like Krennic, they unfortunately tend to have more influence and effect on events than they probably should. So, this cuts to Cassian being processed. Syril is diseased. Quite literally. There's a lot of really, really good exposition in this scene. Andor's paying attention, of course, but I hope you were too. Because as Andor was being processed and as Cassian was being dealt with, we see that the guards are not as coordinated as they portray themselves. They're not as competent as they portray themselves. They are not as in charge as they portray themselves. And they are not as numerous as they portray themselves. Yeah, he's scanning everything. And because he's paying so much attention, and because this show has been doing so much to put us into the mindset, to put us into the first-person view of whoever is talking here, we get a lot of what he sees, too. And yeah, these are just frickin' rent-a-cops. Again, same frickin' things as before. There's even a guy who flat out says, sorry, I couldn't be here any further. Yeah, I know, Keith Geargo, just a great name. Near as I can tell, there are 5 people in the room, and when they go forward, there's only 3. The whole system relies on automation and distant supplies, which, yeah, that tracks. And then we see Andy Serkis, whose name is Kino Loy. I'm going to admit I didn't know Andy Serkis was in this, by the way. He does an immediately amazing job, and I cannot help but grin at seeing him again. Andy Serkis, of course, is a really, 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 really good motion capture actor. Pretty much was one of the people pushing and pioneering what motion capture could actually do. Like 20 years ago now, but still, it's still a thing he pushed for. But he still does a really, really good job when he's just acting, which makes sense because he's a very physical actor, given what he's been so used to and given what he helped pioneer. Oh, I 100% grinned. 100%. Yeah, sorry about Snoke here. He is a very underrated actor, which is a damn shame. His portrayal in the MCU was actually one of my favorite characters. He was in... I know he was in Black Panther, and he was also in something else. He was in one of the other films as Claw, as Ulysses Claw. And he actually did a really good job with Claw over in the MCU. Was it Avengers 2? Yeah, you're right. It was, because that was Ultron. He had a relatively small thing going on there, but he was still just joy every time he was on the screen. Cuttlefish. I love it. Moving on. Hem. So, Andy Serkis is amazing, and so the guard leaves, and Kino flat out says he won't be back. 12-hour work shift. Productivity is encouraged, evaluation is constant. But then something much worse shows up. A sub from Nordame. I can't think of anything worse than that. Truly, this is the darkest timeline. I'm sorry. I'm actually having trouble vocalizing this. because no matter what angle you look at it from, no matter how much you zoom in the camera, what they are doing here is so horrific that I actually have trouble explaining it. In my notes, I always just call this place Hell. Capital H Hell, because that's what this is. Guild Wars 1. Guild Wars 2. Xenoblade 3. Thank you, Nordame. As always. So, yeah, 12-hour work shift. They have to compete. He never says it outright, but he's the floor manager, right? And he's competing with the other 7 floors. 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. There's a lot of 7. So he's each table competes with the other tables. Each floor competes with the other floors. And oh, Jesus, Rex. He implies, but does not state outright, that if his floor is behind the other floors, he's in the same boat, right? That he gets his own reward and punishment based on how his floor is doing, just like they get their reward and punishment based on how their table is doing. I have to give tremendous praise for the banter. The dialogue here is some of the best dialogue in the entire show, and that is freaking saying something. It is insane how good the dialogue is here. I feel stupid for just saying this is really good dialogue, but it is. I would have to just replay the scene and go through word by word, line by line, in order to actually process how excellent how fluid, how natural, how in character, how properly expository to us, how much it gets across tone, how much it varies in characterization. We get an insane amount of depth from the way that they talk to each other as they're at the table. And this is when I bring up something else. Everyone in chat's already said this, but this is when they make it aware that the least productive table will be punished. Now, if you don't really properly understand that, let me make this very clear. There is no floor. There is no quota. Just whoever is not doing as well as everybody else, whoever is last, and there will always be a last, is punished. There is no escaping punishment, 100% of the time. All you can do is try to make sure it's not you. We cut from Cassian in Hell. We cut from Cassian in Hell over to Mon Mothma in a slightly different Hell. And yeah, by the way, this is a microcosm of everything. There's a thing Skeen said in a previous episode. You know what it's like to be in prison. To be born. We were born in a hole, and all we've ever known is crawling over other people to get out. You remember that line? One of the most common tricks people in power have used for millennia is to try and make sure that the people who are under them are fighting each other and not themselves. And there's, like, that is true today. That has been true for at least 3,000 years of history that we know of. So, yeah, every day, thousands of people are tortured because of this punishment. And everyone is incentivized to try and ensure that these people are constantly trying to fight each other, not the guards. I mean, you can't do anything about the guards, right? Cut to Mon Mothma in her own personal hell. There's a line that she says, it's a quiet line. There's like 2 lines in this that stuck with me so hard. And the episode doesn't do anything to try and draw attention to them. They're just there. Perrin at 15. You remember Perrin at 15? The Academy firebrand? Perrin is Mon Mothma's husband. I actually already said this, but it's sort of gratifying to have been accurate here. It's nice that I fingered Perrin correctly. Sorry. He has learned to keep his head down. Exactly. That theme. The prison arc, the theme has been in the whole show, but the prison arc continues to emphasize that theme more than anything else. Keep your head down. Eyes forward. Don't move. Don't resist. Don't do anything. Don't draw attention to yourself. Just stay quiet. Just stay quiet and soft and in the corner and hope that nobody actually notices you. Because even being noticed is enough to be punished. Get back to Diego Luna, who was doing some of the best possible things that can be done. The episode continues to do a great job of emphasizing first-person view. We get a lot of audio, we get a lot of visuals, we get a lot of camera angles, we get a lot of background movement, all emphasizing exactly what is going through Cassian's face. And yeah, he is just processing that the hell he just walked through is his everyday. Do you want to hear something interesting about human psychology? I'm dead serious. We have the incredible and tremendous ability to survive just about anything mentally, as long as there's an end point. You know what I'm talking about. At any level of the scale, whether it's horrific pain, or some kind of debilitating disease, or maybe it's just a really bad work day, or maybe it's just a job you're not really into, or whatever, it doesn't matter. We have the ability to process that as long as we've got that end point to look forward to. If we don't have that end point to look forward to, if we can't reach the weekend, if we can't reach the end of the shift, we have nothing. And it gets so much harder to process, and it starts to break us psychologically. It's been used for many centuries as a way to break people, is to try and emphasize that there is no escape, that there is no getting better, that this is just it. As long as we have that light at the end of the tunnel, we'll keep going. And oh, what do they give us? A counter that ticks down. This is when you're free. That's horrible. That might actually be the most statistically, calculatedly minute light at the end of the tunnel I have ever seen. Just a number that ticks down every shift. There was a comic in the wake of the Age of Apocalypse over in X-Men. This is very minor spoilers. Where Beast, not Shaw, God, what's Beast's name? Henry? I can't remember Beast's name. Anyways, Beast has been chained up and locked up. And there is it is Hank. I knew it was an H word. Hank. He's been locked up and chained up. And there's like a freaking gerbil water dispenser. And it dispenses enough water that has been carefully calculated to ensure that he can stay alive, no more and no less, as long as he only pulls as much water as he needs from it. That's what this reminds me of. I barely remember that issue, but I remember so much about that scene, because that stuck with me. It's the downside of understanding as much as we do about how we operate, both physically and psychologically. There's a line where Kino says, "Keep it down! Keep it down!" Nobody's loud. Nobody's being demonstrable. Nobody's saying anything. Why is he saying... Oh. How many people do you think are vomiting right now? How many people do you think are being sick or having issues because, of everything they go through? 12-hour work shift. I don't even work 12-hour work shifts. 7 days a week. Doing hard labor, by the way. They do a good job with the physicality of making it clear that what they're doing is hard physical labor. We also see the one person doing the hand gestures to someone else. They don't explain that. They don't develop that. They don't need to. It's just there. That's the third time, or excuse me, the second time of 3 that they emphasize that the prison is not as under control as it could be or should be. Well, I think the food tube is. I actually believe them. Let me tell you a little bit of a weird fact about real-life jails. Because of all the weird, awful, horrible things about them, the food tends to be really nutritious. Like, calculatedly nutritious. Oh, it's not tasty or nourishing or fulfilling, but it is very, very nutritious. Yeah, it's just straight up nutrient paste, right? That's what it is. That's all. It makes sense in a weird sort of a way. They want you to be able to work. They want you to be able to function. Yeah, this is Archon loaf. That's exactly what I was leading to. The winner gets flavor. This is when we find that out. The winner gets flavor. What flavor? Can you choose? And yeah, you can get as much as you want. They just keep providing it. Yeah, no, it's just goop. It's just baby mash, essentially. Or whatever that's actually called. I love these back and forths. We cut to one hell with Cassian, and then we cut to the other hell with Mothma. And I hate to repeat myself, but this is the whole point, isn't it? That even Mon Mothma, in her stupidly, insanely hard to clean, ridiculously opulent apartment with a skyline view of Coruscant, is still just another cog in the machine. That she is still stuck in the same oppression circle. As she's discussing things with the other senators and representatives, trying to drum up support for her latest bill, pushing against overreach, I hear an argument I've heard 1,000 times before, and that's not even an exaggeration. I've been hearing this argument since in the 90s, at this point, since I was a kid. Don't you think he's pushing for too much security? Well, we know what too little looks like. What does it actually mean? Surveillance and prosecution without limit. And the counter-argument to that, and this is the important part, is if you're doing nothing wrong, what is there to fear? I have nothing to hide, so I have nothing to fear. Now, duh at how broken of a statement that is, but I've heard that argument so many times. This very episode, or rather more accurately, the previous episode, has done a great job of demonstrating how Cassian has something to fear. I do like her counteraction. I worry about your definition of wrong. It's also interesting how she's sussing out who's dealing with what and where and how and trying to figure out what kind of allies she can lean on. Just she's playing the field. She's doing a really good job. I love Mon Mothma this so much. You have 7 seconds, 7 seconds to get to your cell. And it's so bright. And this is when they mentioned the food. They also mentioned casually that, of course, the table that Cassian was at got fried again. Thank you for not showing me that episode. No minimums, no quotas, just a race. But then everyone is like, hang on, we want word. What about what? P-O-R-D. And you're probably thinking, huh? Yeah, they talk about sentencing. They talk about this whole thing. Of course it's news. News spreads like wildfire in a prison or a jail. Trust me. Any word gets in there from guards or outside people brought in, and it is all over the place in minutes. So they're trying to figure out, they're trying to get more word, more information, because he's from outside. He's their latest intel source. What's going on? He, of course, says he knows nothing. He probably knows a little bit more than he's getting across here, but he's just, I got nothing. There's a one line in the background. Someone says, we're the ones getting punished for the attack on Aldhani. Then one guy walks over to Cassian. Don't look at your number. You're never getting out. You're here as long as they want you. Kino is the one who tries to shut him down on that. Kino pushing down after being pushed down by the guards. No doors, no privacy whatsoever. And you know what strikes me the most about this cell block? How realistic it is. If you've ever seen a prison or a jail or a cell in fiction, I assure you that what you have seen is not what it looks like at all. It's not. You know, they've got the bars and they've got like the weird thing. You could picture in your head, right? There's like a stereotypical appearance of what we tend to do. There's a set that tends to be repeated many, many times throughout the course of fiction, whether it's a movie, a game, show, book, doesn't matter. They all follow a very similar pattern. That's not what cells look like. That's not what blocks look like. I once went to a jail, which was a room. Nice, big, empty room. There's nothing in it except for these kind of lights, which never turned off at any point in time. And there was like I don't even want to call it a bench. It was a chunk of the wall that was sticking out of the wall. And a chunk over there. And a big thing right in the middle that you could sit on or lean against. That's it. You just find a spot to lay down and sleep. Over there in the corner is a toilet. No, there's no walls covering the toilet. Why would you want privacy while you're getting naked and going to the bathroom? What is wrong with you? Toilet paper? Oh, you got to pay for that. Don't worry, shower time's mandatory. That's what a real cell looks like. Now picture this episode for a second. Just these dinky, tiny little college dorm room cots, right? No comforts whatsoever. Barely large enough to actually fit you. Certainly not comfortably. Food thing, little plate, right? Little display showing your number. Comm system. Yeah, it's a capsule hotel. And the car, I noticed the hum. I was going to comment on that in a second. Because as the camera floor... we skip ahead a scene to respond to what Huthor said. As the camera pans up from the floor, we hear the floor humming. Oh yeah, hope you don't sleepwalk. So the camera pans up on the floor and we can hear the buzz. The Star Wars Hotel sucks? I don't know. I actually don't know anything about it, Spartan. So, Mon Mothma became a senator at the age of 16 and already been married for a year to Perrin. It's a really quiet background thing, very clearly some foreshadowing and world building, because apparently, according to Chandrilan custom, they are married off at 15, as organized by their parents. And notice that the camera is on Leda while they're talking about that. And sadly and disgustingly, it makes so much sense for people who have, like the Chandrilans, who have such a long-standing nobility and economic might within the Republic. Of course these people do that. And yeah, she's getting there, clearly. She's getting to the 15 range. Then we cut to the scene where we hear the buzz. And what happens is probably one of the smartest transitions I've seen in this entire show. So, yeah, no kidding, 040. Again, she was nobility. She's aristocracy, don't forget that. So the camera slowly pans up, and we see Cassian, who is freaking out as hard as he possibly can. Diego Luna does one of the most realistic takes on someone having a complete mental breakdown I've seen in a long time. Not a panic attack. We saw that back in Arcane. No, this is him just shutting down. Then there's a very quick thing where the light turns on, and we just see 30 shifts later, and he's just there, eating his food, putting it back. Everyone gets into the giant room, naked for the mass showering, goes, grabs your fresh linens, getting ready for your work shift. It's so normal. He's already adapted his entire body language. There's a quote from a terrible game that has stuck with me ever since because it is so true. Do you know what the true sound of despair is? It is silence. FF13-3 is the game. It's even a dumb scene. These are clearly very heavy pieces they're bolting together here. Trying to chunk together. It's the scene where Lightning is trying to rescue, I can't even think of her name, her sister. Sarah, I think, was her name. And she's trying to convince Sarah that because she can hear the spirits wailing in despair, that they're not actually in despair, and therefore she shouldn't follow Buna Velzebah's plan. I remember entirely too much about that game, considering it's not a particularly good game. But the quote stuck with me, because it's so true. When you are truly in despair, there is nothing. There's no outrage, there's no violence, there's no defiance, there's no yelling or screaming or bemoaning. You've just given up. So big, heavy pieces they're bolting together. And yeah, obviously the props are not. I actually noticed a few times where they were clearly like, whoops, and we're lifting them a bit faster than they should. It's very, very quick, like less than a second in every case. But it's supposed to be big, heavy things, and the sound design is doing its usual excellent job to sell the idea. And we cut to Zal, and I actually caught his name. They give everyone's name there. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't catch their names. Except for Zal, of course. He's starting to have issues. Of course he is. They're assembling things to go on the floor to be disassembled. I actually have another theory, but I'm going to hold on to that for right now. And, of course, as they're working, they're paying attention to the other tables. Again, word and rumor spread like wildfire, and they're hungry for any information from the outside at all. Kino actually comes over to shut down that discussion. And he says something weird. He says, "Look, you're on pace to be, the fastest one today. Good job, team." So don't mess it up. And then he just switches right back to the hard persona. That stuck with me for a second. I'm gonna see where that goes. Cut straight to Vel and Cinta. Oh, nope, sorry, I cut ahead. Cut straight to Bix over on Ferrix. And yeah, Melshi is obviously from Rogue One. Marva is cold, obviously. Again. Having trouble breathing. She's definitely on her way out. And she was trying to pry open the old floodgate under the hotel. What I find most interesting about that particular scene is that, obviously that's foreshadowing. Duh, I anticipate that'll come up again. But what I find most interesting is that when Brasso and Bix are discussing it, they're with the ends of, she's joining the rebellion, right? That's the tone that they use. I do like that the entire community embraces Marva. Of course they freaking do. Of course they freaking do. Then we cut straight to Vel and Cinta, who are watching them. This is such a messed up scene. Yeah, no kidding, Rox. Because we see a little bit of Vel and Cinta's relationship and how neither of them are particularly right or wrong. They just have varying levels of dedication to the cause. In fact, Cinta flat out says, "The struggle always comes first. We take what's left." And there's this wonderful bit where Cinta is saying, maybe, what kind of cover story are you going to use? I don't know, maybe some rich girl who's fleeing from her parents. And Vel's response is, "That's cold, even for you." Ah, so Vel comes from wealth. Let me tell you a little anecdote that I find fascinating here. How many of you have ever played the Star Wars pen and paper game? It's gone over a few editions over the years, and it's got its issues. I've played it and run it several times myself. But for those of you who haven't, one of the things you have to set up is your backstory. It's actually a very important part of a game like that. I mean, I know you're saying duh, but like a game like Dungeons and Dragons, if you're actually just playing 5th edition, you don't actually need a backstory. Same with 3rd edition, stuff like that. But in something like Star Wars, it's actually baked into some of the stuff you start with and some of the connections you have, right? There's mechanics, there's gameplay stuff with regards to your backstory. Same thing as in Cyberpunk. I bring all this up because the most common backstory, even the book said it, the most common story by far, if you're going to make a rebel character, is ex-Imperial. And I mention this because of people like Mothma and, I presume, Vel. Can I just say a really quick anecdote? I'm sorry. I keep stuttering over Vel's name because I actually know somebody in real life named Vel, and it just keeps throwing me. He's a he, too, so it's even worse. Anyways, what makes this all disturbing is this scene where Vel and Cinta are talking. They're here waiting for Cassian to murder him, to assassinate him. So, two groups looking for Cassian, and nobody knows he's so far drowned in the system that without a miracle he is never coming up for air. And then there's one other, yeah, Crix Madine, he's another X. There's actually quite a few X-Imperials. Akbar arguably qualifies. Although that's debatable since he was an X-Imperial slave, but whatever. Yeah, I know, right? They've already got him. They've had him this whole time. Probably not Trihexia. That's true, Platoon. I forgot about Katarn, another Ex-Imperial. Han would qualify under certain circumstances. Luke was right on his way to becoming that. Biggs arguably was. I'm getting off topic. Point being, Wedge was definitely Ex-Imperial. Mara Jade was Ex-Imperial. Getting off topic. It's really common is the point I'm trying to bring up. And at first, I would like to be like, oh, that's cheap. But no, actually, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? It just makes too much sense that certain types of people are going to look around them and be like, yeah, okay, this ain't for me. Right? Right? And then there's a line. There's a line that stuck with me. It's one of those quiet background lines. That's just, it's so perfect. Bix goes to see Pac. And Bix says, are you as slow as I am? Or no, he says, excuse me, Pac says, are you as slow as I am? And she says, yeah, losing the hotel is not good for business. Did you catch that? It's the slow squeeze. Slowly choking them. Because that makes perfect sense. I'm not even sure they did it on purpose. The Imperials probably just saw a large building they could repurpose into a headquarters. But they took out one of the major hotels in a major thoroughfare in a town that relies on people coming in from the outside to sell parts to. Of course, taking out the hotel is going to drive down all local businesses. That's okay. We've got Imperial jobs that can take them up, right? This is just the same damn thing they've been doing this whole show. This is what they did to the Aldani. This is what they've been doing. Just, I'm sorry. Yeah, the guy on the bus. You can't even drive across the wasteland anymore. This is just standard operating procedure. Just one more step. We cut over to Clea. We've known for a while now that she's pretty much on Luthen's level and has been for a while. I really want to know, like, where that relationship got to, because these two, I keep expecting her to be a traitor. But at the end of the day, I find myself looking at her and thinking she's probably even worse than a traitor. She's probably a true believer, even more than Luthen is. Actually, yes, I do, Cashel. I know, Ferrix was better off under the corporations than under the Galactic Empire. Boy, does that say something. Luthen repeats the line, I'm not slipping. Not slipping. And obviously she tries to comfort him a little bit there, but a valid point is being made. Luthen has spent years at this point, quietly and in the background. Now they've gone loud. Those are two very different environments and two very different skill sets. And you really get the feeling that Luthen isn't really sure how to handle that. And apparently there's a Luthen speech coming up. Yeah, he flat out says, I've been hiding for too long. He also, for all of his brutal speechifying that he's already said, do you remember that horrible, horrible line he mentioned to Mon Mothma? I feel like Clea is the actual cold fish here. Because she is, at least ostensibly, dedicated to the cause and isn't bothered by that. Whereas Luthen is dedicated to the cause and is bugged like hell by it. If I might be so bold, Clea is a Justice Lord. whereas Luthen is a Cisco. They're both doing the same thing. The only difference is how much it bothers them, how much it matters to them. You can feel that Clea has long since stopped caring. You just get that. She's such a cold fish. Wonderful praise to the actress. We cut to Vel looking at Cinta. It's actually a really great transition because Vel, who's leaving on the transport, is looking out the window, and then that cuts to her looking at Cinta because Vel is thinking about Cinta. That transition then cuts to Cinta, who's looking at Marva's place because Cinta is not looking at Vel, she's looking at the job. This is actually interesting because it's tell then show, but it's an actually wonderful way to showcase the difference between the two women and how their mentalities are. And then we see Luthen getting on the Fondor, and then in my notes, all I have written is the word no. Because I realized the moment the camera transitioned to the cell block what was about to happen. Because there's a guy standing there, looking down at the floor, at the edge of his cell. And he's doing some really good body language acting. Again, excellent work from an extra who's really only in like 3 scenes. I don't blame him. I would have done the same thing without hesitation, and I would have done it earlier. That's how you get out. That didn't bother me that much. Not really, because the first time I tried to commit suicide, I was 13. We're old friends. Suicide doesn't bother me that much. That's why I'm so casual about it. You know what really did bother me? All the lines of dialogue in the immediate wake of it. Who is it now? We'll be smelling them all night. You rail here at night, I got no sympathy. And their table's going to be slow, too. They get angry. They get angry at this man. Because after all, they're going to suffer for it. Yeah, they're going to be one less man tomorrow. That table's almost assuredly going to get fried now. They've even got a casual term. Did you catch that? That wonderful... if you ever want to do, okay, don't actually take this as rid of it because I just disagreed with myself in my head. Sorry, I'm 3 steps ahead of my own conversation here. I apologize. One of the tips that can work in fiction is if you want to portray something as normal, you come up with a word for it, a slang word for it, right? In this case, suicide by stepping onto the electric thing, which they call railed. The catch is a lot of fiction does that too badly, and either does that too often or too frequently, which I know sounds like the same thing, but you get my point. In here, they only use the word twice, but it's very clear immediately that this is something that is happening and has happened regularly. In fact, the one guy's line, you rail here at night, I got no sympathy. In other words, if you're going to go kill yourself, do it properly. Do it over there. So, earlier, I didn't really even mention this, but the reason that we cut to Luthen and Clea is because Bix was reaching out to them. And naturally, they shut that down. He railed before a shift. What an inconsiderate prick. How dare he? Oh no, they're not going to touch that body until next shift. Nobody's going to come down there for a while. Yeah, you lose hope, you keep it to yourself. You're sick, you come to me. Flu, sniffles, cold. So, Bix called out, which of course naturally means the ISB has now caught their attention. Of course they have. I mean, duh, I called that the moment Bix decided to hit that comm. So the ISB has now gone after Pac, and now they're beelining Bix, a known accomplice. And they're doing all this crap just to catch someone who's in hell. Then we get some good fan service, and I mean that. It is definitely fan service, 100%. But Sam Whitaker. Forrest Whitaker, oh my god. Saw Gerrera, played by Forrest Whitaker, shows up. But also we get a quick panning shot and we see that he's got some incoms. Did you catch that? I'm not sure if those are Z95s or the actual X-Wings, but either way, he's got some real hardware there. Like actual military-grade stuff. Of course he does. He saw. And, again, this scene does some good stuff because, first of all, of course Saw is involved here. Of course Luthen knows Saw. Duh. Luthen, in many ways, is Saw. I actually already called that, if you were paying attention. Luthen is on friendly basis with him, and is a supplier to him. It really does show just how fractured the rebellion is, because Saw Gerrera, who is without question the most successful rebel, who has been successfully fighting a guerrilla war against the Galactic Empire for over a decade now, he's been not really accomplishing much. Did you catch that? Saw, for all his stuff, for all that he is, and for all he's approaching, is so irrelevant to the Galactic Empire that they never cared enough to escalate by using him as an excuse. Did you ever think about that? Saw has military-grade hardware. He's almost assuredly a marauder. That is to say, he is presented as if he has plenty of funds. Tons of money flowing through his system. Of course he does. Because they hit a spot and they rob it blind while they're there, and they use that to keep their material going. That's how you perform this kind of a guerrilla war on this scale. And there's costs for that too. He doesn't live in luxury, he lives in a goddamn cave, and his health is clearly on its way out. So this man, who is the best singular point of resistance the rebels have at this point, is so irrelevant that nobody really cares enough to bother. It wasn't until Aldhani that they actually decided to turn things around. And I love how Luthen keeps turning it around on Saw. Like, you're just continuing to convince me that it's you. Yeah, he's probably listed as just another pirate, honestly. We have a very brief tidbit earlier where Miro is talking to the board, to Yularen specifically, and actually says this all started because we were trying to find, maybe it was in the previous episode, we were trying to find a certain file, and the Navy was afraid to actually list this on their reports. How much stuff has Saw stolen that nobody knows about because nobody reported on it? Because they were afraid of being yelled at or punished from those above them. I think you're right, Blitterball. And we see how Saw is starting to get worse. And of course he is. I don't blame Saw. As weird as that sounds. Oh yeah, no. Exactly, Cashel. I don't blame Saw for what he's descended into. Obviously his health is failing. We'll see that conclude in about 4 years in Rogue One. But mentally, Luthen still feels like there's an end game somewhere and is primarily thinking long term. No, I did not, Spartan. Saw has been fighting this fight for too damned long. And this is when he gives that quote that Huthor just mentioned a little bit ago. Neo-Republicans, separatists, the Gorman Front, the Partisan Alliance, the Sectorists, the Human Cultists, the Galaxy Partitionists, they're all lost. Let me ask you a question. How many of those names do you recognize? And more importantly, how many of them do you not? How many dozens of different little cells are up there fighting their own little fight, and how many of them are so beneath our notice, the notice of the audience, that we've never even heard of them before? The Gormans is something Mon Mothma herself has actually mentioned. And that's kind of Saw's point, actually. Can I just say, by the way, Forrest Whitaker just nails this so hard. It's so good. It's shocking how good this is. I've seen this man in Battlefield Earth. It's weird watching this. And so he asks, who are you, Luthen? And Luthen hesitates for several long seconds before he finally answers. He tries to turn his answer into, a way to recruit him again. But I'd like to think that Luthen is legitimately honest here. That he realizes this is the moment to start being sincere. I am a coward. I am a man terrified the Empire's power will grow beyond the point where we can do anything to stop it. And that is a terrifying thought. It's easy to say that's unlikely. It is. Because we know how many people fight back and push back and how much you can only push so far, right? Peasant rebellions. There's only so much that people can take, right? But the thing that's easy to lose in all of that is that those pushbacks only happen if people push back. And with careful consideration, things can just be smoothed over. And if people don't push back until it's too late to push back. So Saw actually looks insulted at first, but manages to turn it around at the last second and realizes that, you know, obviously Luthen is not his enemy, and he actually finds this whole thing amusing. You're going to have to do this on your own. Keegar is going to have to find someone else. I wish him good luck. Then we cut to them torturing Pack. Great. Great. Actually, excuse me, to be more terminologically specific, they have just tortured Pack. And scenes like this are so horribly necessary, because I've been saying this entire time that for as engaging and interesting and well-acted and well-presented the characters like Miro and Syril and the director guy from the Commandant, remember him? As interesting as these characters are, as good as these characters are, we have to understand that they are still horrible. We don't want to sympathize with these monsters too much, for monsters they are, human or no. And yeah, she specifically goes out of her way to keep him here, just to imply to Bix. And then, cut to credits. What do we feel about this one? Actually, the episode ends on the workday happening. I think this is our first real time skip in the whole show so far. About a month. Yeah, it's easy to root for someone like Miro. I don't. But it's easy to see why people would. That's the point, isn't it? If the Galactic Empire was nothing but Syril's, they would have lost years ago. Incompetent boob. Unfortunately, I find myself agreeing with the crowd. Purple. Jesus Christ, this is the weirdest, longest string of purples I've ever seen. This is insane. Next episode is Nobody's Listening. I'll see you in about an hour.